Coming up on Network Africa. South African policeman found guilty of killing a Nigerian in 2018 gets 30-year jail term. Zimbabwe's main opposition party, the Movement for Democratic Change, accused police of using live ammunition on its leader, Nelson Chamisa. And the death toll rises to 26 from a bus crash in Tunisia. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin this week with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
The French military on Sunday repatriated the bodies of soldiers killed when two helicopters collided during operations in Mali on November 25. A total of 13 soldiers died in a collision between a Tiger and a Cougar helicopter. The troops had been called in as reinforcement to back up French soldiers tracking down militants in the region. The French presidency announced it was the single biggest loss of French troops in combat in the region since intervening in Mali in 2013. France has more than 4,500 troops countering insurgencies in the Sahel, where violence by militants linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State has grown in recent years. The health ministry says at least 24 Tunisians were killed on Sunday after a bus crashed during an excursion in the northern town of Andouane. The bus veered off a winding road when the driver failed to negotiate a sharp turn and crashed to the bottom of a ravine. Officials say the bus was carrying 43 people. President Kais Saied and Prime Minister Youssouf Chahed attended a crash site in the northwestern region of Tunisia, which attracts large numbers of visitors but has poor infrastructure. Over 200 people in Democratic Republic of Congo took to the streets of Kinshasa to join the global call for urgent action on climate change. Greenpeace Africa and civil society groups focused their protest on the clearing of Congo Basin's forest for industrial agriculture, which they say will have a devastating effect on the climate. The environmental group also released a report accusing Sutcom, a subsidiary of Singapore-based rubber giant Algerian Agri, of destroying a tropical forest the size of Paris in southern Cameroon.
Greenpeace and its partner are marching to ask the government, the DRC government, all the donors, all the countries that will be meeting in Spain for the conference of the party to make sure that they are talking about protecting the forest in the DRC.
Thousands of people worldwide rallied to demand more action on climate change, aiming to force political leaders to come up with urgent solutions at the United Nations Climate Conference in Madrid. And government supporters took to the streets in Algeria on Saturday to show solidarity ahead of next month's elections that are opposed by a long-running mass protest movement. The marches, organized by the General Union of Algerian Workers, attracted over 10,000 people across several cities. They are the biggest public show of strength so far by pro-government groups in response to weekly mass protests which erupted in February, when hundreds of thousands of people flooded the streets to demand that the ruling hierarchy quit power. and the army stepped back from politics.
To our main stories now, 24-year-old South African policeman Austin Luciano Reynolds, who killed a Nigerian Ebuka Okoli in January 2018, has been sentenced to an effective 30 years in jail. Constable Reynolds, who was convicted on 3 counts of robbery and 1 of murder last Friday, got 15 years on each count of robbery, which will mostly run concurrently, and 25 years for count 3, which is murder. Speaking with Channels Television, the spokesperson for South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority, Natasha Ramkissoon-Kara, explains how the sentence rounded up to 30 years.
Count 1 was robbery, that was 15 years. Count 2 was robbery, that was 15 years. Count 3 was the murder, 25 years. And count 4 was the robbery, again 15 years. So that was the sentence. And then what the court ordered was that the sentences for count 2 and 4, which is count 2 was the robbery and count 4 was the robbery. So the sentences for count 2 and 4 and 10 years from count 1, which was the robbery, run concurrently with the 25 years. So basically what happens is the 25 plus the 5 years from the count 1 that give you the 30 years. The National Prosecuting Authority does welcome the sentence and conviction in this matter.
Now, staying with South Africa, the Minister of Public Enterprises says South African Airways will undergo radical restructuring to ensure its financial sustainability. Mr. Pravin Gordhan says there is no other way forward for the troubled state-owned airline that has suffered cumulative losses of more than $2 billion over the past 13 years and has not made a profit since 2011. He said discussions with lenders are ongoing to secure the necessary funds to cover the operational and structural transition over the next few months. Mr. Gordhan expressed confidence in the airline's efforts to restore sales. Now, Kenya Airways needs to retain flexibility and avoid government-imposed limitation if the loss-making carrier wants to be competitive. This is according to its chief executive, Sebastian Mikos. He says the government must move quickly to nationalize the airline as regional competitors seek to carve out market share portage into their national carriers. In July, lawmakers voted to renationalize the loss-making airline, which is 48.9% state-owned, 7.8% held by Air France-KLM, and 38% owned by local lenders, hoping to emulate the success of state-owned Ethiopian Airlines, Sub-Saharan Africa's biggest airline. Kenya Airways was privatized more than 20 years ago but sank into debt and losses in 2014 after a failed expansion drive and a slump in travelers after a major terror attack. In August, it saw its first half pre-tax loss more than double from a year earlier to 8.56 billion Kenyan shillings, that's $83 million. Chief Executive Sebastian Mikos said the government will likely appoint a nationalization advisor by the end of the year, and the process should be completed next year.
As an airline, we have a need of course, equity injection. We have a need of cash flow improvement, and we have we have a need of growing our market share. So yeah, if we had 450, but 350 would do too. It's more of again, it's not a precise accounting figure.
Countries like Tanzania and Rwanda are investing heavily in their national carriers, threatening Kenya Airways' market share. Ethiopian Airlines runs air transport assets, including airports and fueling operations, under a single company. Funds from the profitable parts support the others.
KQ can be profitable, but I don't believe it can be profitable without investments. Because, you know, in this industry, if you want to have dollarless costs, you need to invest $2. And I'm not talking about bringing billions of dollars for the fleet. No. I'm talking really about the things on the ground.
Kenya Airways is also expecting an equity injection from the government to help improve cash flow. He disputed analysts' view that a government takeover would not return the airline to profitability. According to Mikos, being privately owned did not help the airline avoid its financial woes, and if state ownership works for the competition, why not for Kenya Airways? But he says the airline must retain its commercial flexibility and avoid some of the limitations imposed on other state-owned companies, such as regulations requiring public tendering. Zimbabwe's main opposition party, the Movement for Democratic Change, has accused police of using live ammunition at the event attended by its leader, Nelson Chamisa. Police, however, say they only used tear gas canisters to disperse the crowd, which was preventing people from accessing the Dombotom clinic. But the MDC insists that police fired live rounds at their leaders as they arrived at a tree planting event held in Marondera, east of the capital, Harare. He said that 4 people were injured in the incident. Now, the death toll from Sunday's bus crash in Tunisia has risen to 26. This is the latest update coming from the Health Ministry. The tour bus was carrying 43 people when it plunged off a cliff in the town of Amdoun. The driver is said to have failed to negotiate a sharp turn. The bus had set off from the capital, Tunis, to the town of Ain Draham, a popular destination for Tunisians near the Algerian border. And at least 14 people have been killed after gunmen opened fire inside a church in Burkina Faso. The victims were attending a church service in Hantukara in the eastern part of the country on Sunday. The identity of the gunmen is yet unknown and the motive is not clear. However, jihadist groups have been known to carry out similar attacks. Hundreds of people have been killed in the country over the past few years, sparked by ethnic and religious tensions, especially on the border with Mali. The World Food Programme has suspended food delivery to thousands of people in the embattled town of Beni in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, is calling for an urgent restoration of security to allow humanitarian agencies immediate access to support population at the epicenter of the ongoing Ebola outbreak. Attacks on communities have created a humanitarian crisis threatening the aid distribution.
For us, we have suspended it temporarily because both our staff and, more importantly, the staff of our partners who are working with us on the ground, the security was not guaranteed anymore, and the access was very difficult. That means that thousands of people will not receive food assistance in the coming days.
The overall average percentage of contacts under surveillance in the last 7 days is 86%, but it dropped as low as 59% on 25 November. These are essential functions of the response that are well known to reduce the risk of spread of the virus, and the fluctuations in performance following insecurity may enable, or we're actually pretty sure it will enable, new chains of transmission.
UNHCR and its partners are calling for an urgent restoration of security to allow humanitarian agencies immediate access to support the affected population. Hundreds of households are currently sleeping in churches and schools.
You're watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Still to come on the program. Ghana cancels a referendum on changing the rules around local government elections. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.